took Gomez out and you put one of those apostles there, how would you act? What would you say if he said, this is what we are to do in our churches? Why, you wouldn't question it, right? In the same way, that authority has been passed on to our bishops. That's why obedience to the bishops is primary. You mean it's just blind obedience? Well, they tell you to jump off a bridge. Well, for heaven's sake, you use a little common sense. But you don't be disobedient, you don't come forthright and be disobedient to what the church says through them. Because again, I go back to the saints, and I'll go to one that was very, very recent, Padre Pio. He was put in silence for 50 years by the local bishop. And though he made an appeal to the Pope, which is his right, as is all of the faithful, if you feel that the bishop is out of place, then you appeal to the Holy Father. But for 50 years, he did not do anything except what the bishop ordered. The bishop ordered him silent for 50 years. And then finally, his case was heard and he was released. And it was shortly thereafter he passed away. But for 50 years he stayed obedient. That's important to note. Do you see what I'm saying? And why? Because we treat the bishops as if they were the apostles themselves appointed by Jesus himself. Because that's where they are and who they are in relationship to our church. Okay? Are we good?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. I like this. Any other questions you have? And not just about Martin Luther in general. I like this. I like this.
So I thought when they say in the creed that we believe in the one universal apostolic Catholic Church, that they were one with us. I was so happy.
All they are is saying the traditional creed. They don't mean Catholic as in Catholic. They mean it as in universal. That's the short answer. Yes?
Who are the giants in Genesis chapter 6?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. That's a very good one. Wow. All right, let's go for it. I opened up the can of worms. Let's just dive right into it. Well, first let's talk about what passage that you're referring to. This is Genesis chapter 6. So let's go to Genesis 6. I'm just looking at the time. We've kind of lost our Song of Solomon, so we might as well just go on this Bible Answer Man kind of route right now. Genesis chapter 6, page 4 if you have my Bible. It says, when men began to multiply on the face of the ground and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took to wife such as they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide with man forever, for he is flesh, but his days shall be 120. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. They were mighty men that were of old, men of renown. Okay, so that's my Bible. The word in verse 4 in my Bible's translation just says Nephilim. Right? In older Bibles, like the King James, and I believe the Douay-Rheims, but don't quote me on that. And we don't even have to guess, I could look it up. But if we were, this is commonly translated in the King James Bible as giants. There were giants in the earth in those days, it says. what is this? What's going on? What's happening here? This is one of the more, frankly, controversial passages in the Old Testament. Not that most of Genesis 1 through 9 isn't controversial as in and of itself. I mean, talking snakes and people living to be 700 years old. I mean, that brings up all kinds of controversy. You know, is this true? Did this happen? What's going on? Well, this is one of those. It is just before the flood narrative, and it's pointing out that the wickedness of men have grown to such an extent that God's going to wipe out the whole earth and basically start over again. And that Noah is a righteous man. He is the only righteous man on the earth that God could find. And because of his righteousness, he and his family are going to be saved from this terrible judgment. Okay? So that's the background for this. Now the question is, what are these Nephilim? Well, this is a Hebrew word. It's a Hebrew word. Okay? And it's a masculine word, and the reason I know that is because of this, im. This in Hebrew would be our equivalent of S. Like cat, cats. Dog, dogs. Chair, chairs. What does it mean? More than one, right? Anytime you see I am in a Hebrew word, it just means more than one. If I have one cherub in here, I have a cherub. But if I have two, I have cherubim. If there's one seraph in here, that's one. But if I have more than one seraph, seraphim. That's where those words come from. They're Hebrew words, and I am is simply a pluralizing suffix. It just means more than one. So the question is, what's a nephil? If this means more than one, what's a nephil? Right? It means more than one of them, right? But what's a nephil in Hebrew? This word is rarely used in the Old Testament. In fact, it's only in this place and another place in the book of Numbers, if I'm not mistaken, that this word is used. So it's difficult to actually understand what the writer was intending. But we do know that the word nephil means great. Means great. Great not like terrific. It means great as in size. Okay? It means size great. Big would be another word for it. So when we look at this, it means they were big or great. Great ones in those days. That would be another way of understanding it. Now, the way that the King James translated as giants implies that these were huge, tall, fee-fi-fo-thumb kind of creatures. That may not necessarily be what they were. These may be great in either mental abilities, military abilities. These were people that were heroic in some way. They were great ones. Outstanding. Okay? Charismatic. Does that make sense? If we talk about George Washington was a great man. We're talking about his character, who he was, how he conducted himself, how he was very noble. That's what's implied here. That's the kind of great that we're looking at. It's some sort of level of nobility, but it made them seem bigger than life. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that they were tall. Okay? Now, the big controversy about what these Nephilim are has to do with the narrative that begets them. Okay, so let's go back to the narrative. It says, men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. All right? Men had daughters. That's nice. Then it says, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair. Now that's a very interesting phrase. The sons of God and the daughters of men.
Divine beings.
Okay? Saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took to wife such as they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide with man forever. He is flesh, and his number shall be 120 years. The great ones were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were mighty men that were of old, the men of renown. So, the question is, who are the sons of God that came to the daughters of men, that birthed these great men of old, these renowned men? And there's basically two schools of thought, basically. There may be a third, I would argue, but really the theological camp divides into two parts. Is this. So the question is, who are the sons of God? Who are they? One, they're angels. They're angels. You go, where do you get that from? Well, when you go to the book of Job, hold that thought. Go to the book of Job. Just before the book of Psalms, the book of Job. Come to Job chapter 1. There are other places, but this is the best to see this. So chapter 1 of Job, verses 1 through 5, describe how Job is a righteous man. This is on page 395, if you have my Bible. 395, if you have my Bible. So the first part just said, Job is a righteous man. He was very wealthy. He had 7 daughters who were very fair. He had sons, blah, 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 blah. Now look at verse 6. Look what it says. Now there was a day when the what? The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. The sons of God presented themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came among them. Did you see that? And the Lord said to Satan, from whence have you come? Satan answered the Lord, from going back and forth on the earth and from walking up and down upon it. And the Lord said to Satan, and you consider my servant Job. Blah, blah, blah. But what was the first part? What was the first part? Verse 6. Now the day when the sons of God presented themselves before the Lord. Who are these sons of God? Angels. Because the scene transfers up into heaven. What's in heaven? People? No. Not at this point. There were nobody in heaven. Because Job happened before Jesus came. So who are the sons of God? Angels. Angels. And Satan was among them. He snuck in, if you will. Because what is Satan? An angel. He's an angel too. He's a bad angel, but you get it? All right. If we stay in the book of Job, let me see if I can find this one really quick. If we go to chapter, I think it's 30, where's it, 28? Hold on here. Oh, I'm in Proverbs. No wonder I can't find it. There we go. Job 30. 38. Chapter 38, page 416, 417. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid the cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy. He's describing the creation of the universe. God saying to Job, do you know all of this? Were you there when I made the universe? Did you know how long the earth was going to be and all of that? Tell me if you know. Were you there when the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy? Who are the sons of God? Angels. In the Old Testament, because there were very few righteous people, if you will, the angels are called the sons of God. So many theologians, going back to Genesis 6, look at this and they say, go back to Genesis 6, and they say, this is a case in which wicked angels interbred with human women and cause a sort of human-angel hybrid creature to be developed. And these were super intelligent men of renown. They were different because they were a hybrid human-angel combination of some kind. They weren't necessarily fee-fi-fo-fum giants, but they were imbued with this angelic power that made them different from other humans. Okay? They were the great ones. Okay? That's one theory. That's one theory. By the way, the entire book of Enoch in the Jewish Apocrypha describes this as being what is what's happening here in Genesis 6. The book of Enoch describes